The smell of burnt coffee and old maple syrup was the perfume of my life. For 7 years, it had clung to my clothes, my hair, and my skin. I worked at the corner booth, a small diner in Maple Creek, Michigan. That seemed frozen in time. The vinyl on the seats was cracked. The jukebox in the corner hadn't worked since 2005, but the regulars didn't mind. They came for the familiar comfort, the same way I came to work every day, for the familiar comfort of a routine that was helping to build a future. Not my future. Our future? Mine and Leo's. Clara. Table for needs a check. And the old man in the corner wants more coffee. Maya called out, sliding a plate of pancakes onto the pass-through window. I nodded, grabbing the coffee pot. On it? Maya was my best friend. We had started working here around the same time. She was sharp, funny, and had a way of seeing through people's nonsense, especially mine. She watched me now as I refilled Mr. Henderson's cup. My movements automatic. I could feel her eyes on my back. When I returned to the counter, she was leaning against it, wiping down a clean spot that was already clean. You look exhausted, she said. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. Long night, I replied, forcing a smile. Leo was studying late for his final board exams. I was making flashcards. Maya stopped wiping. You were making flashcards? Clara. He's almost 30. Can't he make his own damn flashcards? I bristled, my defensiveness flaring up instantly. He was exhausted. Maya. He just finished a 36-hour shift at the hospital. It's the least I could do. This is a final push. In a few weeks, he'll officially be Dr. Leo Vance. All of this will have been worth it. All of what? Exactly? She asked, her voice softer now. Your life? Your savings? Your dream of going to art school? I flinched. The mention of art school was a low blow. It was a dream I had packed away in a dusty box 7 years ago. When Leo got his acceptance letter to the University of Michigan's medical school, we couldn't afford for both of us to chase a dream. His was more important, more concrete. A doctor could save lives. An artist just paints. That's what I told myself. Anyway, it's a partnership, I said, my voice firm. When he succeeds, we succeed. We're a team. Maya just shook her head slowly, her dark ponytail swinging. A team is supposed to work together. It feels like you're the only one playing. Honey, he's the star quarterback, and you're the entire stadium staff. From the person who lines the field to the one who cleans the toilets after the game. I hated when she was right. Or, when she was almost right. It wasn't that bad. Leo was loving. He was kind. He was just busy. The life of a medical student, and then a resident, was grueling. It was a marathon of sleepless nights, immense pressure, and endless studying. He didn't have time for the little things. That's where I came in. I handled the rent, the bills, the groceries, the cooking, the cleaning. I managed our small world so that he could focus on conquering the bigger one. That night, our apartment felt quiet and empty. Leo had called to say he was stuck at the hospital, that some VIP patient had a complication. He sounded tired, distant. Don't wait up for me, he'd said, his voice crackling over the phone. Okay, I love you, I whispered. There was a slight pause. You too, he replied. Then the line went dead. I stood in the middle of our small living room, the silence pressing in on me. The apartment was a collection of mismatched furniture, most of it secondhand, but it was clean. I made sure of that. On the wall hung a large, framed anatomy chart Leo had used in his first year. I thought it was a romantic piece of decor at the time, a symbol of his journey. Now, it just looked clinical and cold. I ran my hand over the worn fabric of the armchair. His chair. A medical journal was left open on the seat. I picked it up. The page was bookmarked. An article about cardiothoracic surgery. The author was a doctor. Sterling. Harrison Sterling. The chief of surgery at the hospital. I remembered Leo mentioning him. He was a legend. Apparently. And his daughter, Annabeth Sterling, was in Leo's residency program. Leo mentioned her a lot. Actually, Annabeth has this incredible diagnostic mind, he'd said a few weeks ago, his eyes shining with an excitement I hadn't seen in a long time. Her father is Harrison Sterling. You know, she's brilliant. Everyone wants to be on her team. At the time, I'd felt a pang of pride. My Leo was working with the best and the brightest. He belonged with them. Now, a different feeling crept in. A cold, slithering doubt. I pushed it down. It was ugly. I was being insecure. Leo was just admiring a talented colleague. That was all. To distract myself, I opened my laptop and checked our bank account. The numbers were low. As usual. My entire paycheck from the diner went straight to rent and utilities. The little I had left over went into a separate savings account I labeled Dr. Vance's future. It was for his board exam fees, for a new suit for his residency interviews, for the deposit on a nicer apartment once he finally started earning a real salary. Seeing the balance, so carefully built from hundreds of double shifts and skipped lunches, usually made me feel proud. It was tangible proof of my contribution, of my sacrifice. Tonight, it just made me feel empty. I closed the laptop. Maya's words echoed in my head. What about your dreams, Clara? On impulse, I walked to the hall closet and pulled out a large, flat portfolio from the very back, hidden behind old coats and a broken vacuum cleaner. I blew a layer of dust off the cover and unzipped it. Inside were sketches, charcoal drawings of faces from the diner, watercolor paintings of the sun setting over Maple Creek, a self-portrait I'd done when I was 19. My eyes wide with a future that seemed limitless. The girl in the drawing was a stranger to me now. Her hands weren't calloused from carrying hot plates. Her face wasn't etched with a permanent tiredness. She didn't know the smell of burnt coffee. She smelled of turpentine and hope. I traced the outline of her face, a wave of grief washing over me so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. I had given her up. I had given her up for a man who barely had time to say "I love you" back. A key turned in the lock. The front door creaked open. I quickly zipped out the portfolio and shoved it back into the closet just as Leo walked in. He looked like a ghost. His scrubs were wrinkled. His dark hair was a mess. And there were deep, purple shadows under his eyes. "Hey," he said, his voice flat. "Hi," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. "Rough night?" He dropped his bag on the floor with a thud. "You have no idea." He walked past me into the kitchen and pulled a bottle of water from the fridge. He didn't kiss me. He didn't touch me. He hadn't for a while. I was worried. I said, following him, "Is the patient okay?" He took a long drink of water before answering. "It was Dr. Sterling's patient. We were in surgery for 9 hours. Annabeth was first assist. She was incredible. Didn't flinch once." There was that name again. Annabeth. "That's great," I said, my voice sounding weak to my own ears. "You must have been great too." He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "I did my job." He looked around the tiny kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. He wrinkled his nose slightly. "Did you cook cabbage again?" I felt my stomach clench. It was on sale. I was trying to save some money for the— I know. He cut me off, holding up a hand. "For the future. I get it, Clara. I'm just tired of everything smelling like cabbage." The cruelty of the comment, so casual and thoughtless, stung more than a direct insult. I had spent an hour making a meal he wasn't even here to eat, carefully planning it to fit our impossibly tight budget, and all he could do was complain about the smell. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I'll get an air freshener tomorrow." He sighed, the sound full of a weariness that seemed to have nothing to do with the hospital. "It's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm going to shower and go to bed." He walked away, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the lingering smell of boiled cabbage and failure. I looked at the single plate of food I had saved for him, covered in plastic wrap on the counter. Slowly, I picked it up and scraped it into the trash can. The next few weeks passed in a blur of forced cheerfulness on my part and growing distance on his. He passed his board exams, and I was ecstatic. I hugged him tightly, telling him how proud I was. He just smiled weakly and said, "Yeah, it's a relief it's over." There was no "we did it." There was no acknowledgement of the countless nights I had stayed up with him, quizzing him until my voice was hoarse. It was his victory, and his alone. The hospital offered him a residency position in their prestigious general surgery program. It was the best possible outcome, the culmination of everything I had worked for. This was it, the finish line. From here on out, things would be different. The stress would ease. He would have more time. We would finally get to live the life we put on hold for 7 long years. To celebrate, I decided to throw him a surprise party. Nothing big, just us. A celebration of the beginning of our real life. The day he was scheduled to receive his official doctor's coat was a Tuesday. I took the day off from the diner, telling my boss I was sick. The life felt small and insignificant compared to the monumental importance of the day. I spent the entire afternoon transforming our cramped apartment. I bought balloons blue and silver that said "Congratulations, Dr. Vance." I hung a banner across the living room. I cooked his favorite meal, beef stew, the expensive kind with real red wine, not the cheap cooking sherry I usually used. The whole place filled with a rich, savory aroma, a deliberate act of war against the ghost of boiled cabbage. The final touch was his gift. It had taken me 3 months of skimming from the grocery budget to afford it. I placed a small, heavy box in the center of the coffee table. Inside was a top-of-the-line Littman cardiology for stethoscope. It was a deep, glossy black, professional, serious, important. I had gotten the metal chest piece engraved. It was tiny, almost impossible to read unless you were looking for it. Dr. Leo Vance. With all my love. See? I stood back, looking at the scene I had created. It was perfect. A perfect start to our perfect future. I checked the clock. He would be home any minute. My heart hammered in my chest. A giddy, nervous rhythm of anticipation. For 7 years, I had been the person in the background. Tonight, I wanted to be the person he saw first. The one who had been there all along, waiting at the finish line with open arms. I heard the sound of footsteps on the stairs outside our door, followed by the familiar jingle of his keys. I quickly lit the candles on the small cake I had bought. I smoothed down my dress, took a deep breath, and prepared the biggest, brightest smile I could manage. The key slid into the lock. The doorknob turned. The door swung open, and my world fell apart. He wasn't alone. Standing slightly behind him, looking elegant and poised in a sleek black coat, was a woman I recognized from the photos in the hospital newsletter. Her blonde hair was perfect. Her smile was polite but distant. It was Annabeth Sterling. My smile faltered, then died completely. The balloons seemed to mock me. The smell of the stew suddenly felt nauseating. Leo looked at me, then at the balloons, then at the cake. His face was a mask of pale, cold shock. There was no joy in his eyes, no love. There was only pity, and a terrible, gut-wrenching finality. He stepped inside, but Annabeth stayed in the doorway, a silent, beautiful executioner. "Clara," Leo said, his voice quiet and devoid of any emotion I recognized. "We need to talk." Time seemed to slow down, stretching into a thick, syrupy silence. The three of us stood frozen in a tableau of domestic horror. Me, by the cake with its flickering candles. Leo, framed in the doorway, a stranger in his own home. And Annabeth, a perfect, polished specter of a future I was not invited to. Her eyes, a cool, intelligent blue, darted around the room, taking in the pathetic, handmade banner and the cheap balloons. There was a flicker of something in empathy, perhaps, or just clinical assessment. "Leo," I whispered, my voice a dry rustle. He finally moved, turning his head slightly towards Annabeth. "Maybe you should wait in the car," he said, his tone low and controlled. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. She didn't look at me. It was as if I wasn't there at all, just a piece of furniture in a room she was about to vacate. "I'll be downstairs," she murmured, and then she was gone, pulling the door closed behind her, leaving a gust of cold air and expensive perfume in her wake. The click of the door latch was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Now we were alone. What was she doing here? "Leo?" I asked, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. On tonight of all nights, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the worn spot on our cheap rug, the one we always joked was a map of a country we'd invent one day. "This isn't working, Clara." The words were so simple, so mundane. They were the kind of words you use to describe a faulty appliance. Not the end of a 7-year relationship. Not the end of a life. "What isn't working?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The party. I can take the decorations down if you don't like them. I just thought we should celebrate. We finally made it." I gestured around the room, a frantic, pleading motion. "This is it. The finish line." "Stop," he said, and his voice was sharp now. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were cold, hard stones. The warmth I had known for 7 years was completely gone. "Just stop. This isn't a celebration. It's a reminder of everything I'm trying to leave behind." Every word was a physical blow. Leave behind. What are you talking about? I'm what you're trying to leave behind. This life? The one I built for you? You didn't build it for me. He shot back, his voice rising. You built it for us. For this fantasy you have in your head where we get a little house with a white picket fence, and I come home every night at 5. That's not my life. Clara. It never will be. Tears started to well in my eyes, hot and blurring my vision. I never said I wanted that. I just wanted you. I wanted to be your partner. He let out a short, bitter laugh. My partner? Annabeth is my partner. We speak the same language. We understand the pressures, the ambition. When I talk about a Whipple procedure, her eyes light up with intellectual curiosity. What do you do? Clara. You ask if that's a new kind of coffee. The condescension in his voice was suffocating. He was twisting my attempts to understand his world into proof of my inadequacy. I work 12-hour shifts at the diner so you don't have to worry about rent, I said, my voice cracking. I count every penny so you can afford your textbooks. I've put every single one of my dreams on hold for yours. For 7 years. Doesn't that count for anything? Of course it counts, he said. But his tone was dismissive. He started pacing the small room, his movements agitated, trapped. And I'm grateful. Okay. But it's also a weight. I can't breathe. Clara. I go to these hospital fundraisers, these dinners with the department heads, and what am I supposed to say? This is my girlfriend. Clara. She manages a diner. They look at me. And then they look at you. And they don't get it. You don't fit. I've been trying to make you fit into my world. But it's impossible. We're from two different worlds. The world tilted on its axis. He was ashamed of me. After everything. After all the sacrifices. He was ashamed. The man whose stained scrubs I washed without complaint. The man I held when he cried after losing his first patient. The man whose future I had treated as more sacred than my own. Was ashamed of me. The tears now flowed freely. Silent streams of acid down my cheeks. So that's it. 7 years. And you're just throwing it all away because I'm not a doctor? Because I'm not, her? He stopped pacing and stood before me. He looked exhausted. But it was the exhaustion of a man who had finally unburdened himself of a terrible secret. I'm sorry, he said. The words were automatic. Meaningless. I didn't want it to happen this way. I didn't know you were doing all this. He gestured vaguely at the balloons. But it's better this way. A clean break. A clean break. As if 7 years of intertwined lives could be snipped apart like a thread, leaving no frayed edges. No gaping wounds. I love you. I whispered. A last, desperate plea. It was the only weapon I had left. For the first time, a flicker of something that looked like pain crossed his face. He reached out, as if to touch my arm, but then let his hand drop. The Leo you love doesn't exist anymore. Clara. Maybe he never did. He turned and walked towards the door. My mind was screaming. A silent, primal shriek. Don't let him go. Stop him. Say something. But I was paralyzed. Frozen by the sheer, brutal efficiency of his cruelty. He paused at the door and reached into his pocket. He pulled out his keyring. With a deliberate movement, he slid a single key off the ring. Our apartment key? He walked back to the coffee table and placed it down. It landed with a soft, metallic click right beside the small, beautifully wrapped box containing his gift. My gift. The stethoscope. The symbol of the future he was now running towards. A future that included Annabeth and hospital galas and a life I wasn't good enough for. I'll have my friend pick up the rest of my things next week, he said. His back to me. I think that's for the best. And then he opened the door and walked out. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air, all the sound, all the life from the room. I stood there for a minute, maybe 10. I don't know. My body was numb, a hollow shell. My eyes fell on the key he had just used to let himself, and Annabeth, into our home, the key he was now leaving behind. Slowly, like an old woman, I walked to the coffee table. My gaze shifted from the key to the gift. My hands, still trembling, reached for the box. I fumbled with the ribbon, my fingers clumsy and useless. I tore the paper away and lifted the lid. There it was, the black, gleaming stethoscope. It was heavy in my hands, a solid, expensive weight. I ran my thumb over the chest piece, feeling for the engraving. I tilted it towards the light from the window. The tiny letters shimmered. Doctor. Leo Vance. With all my love. See? A sound tore from my throat. A guttural sob of such profound agony it felt like it was ripping me into. The 7 years. The sacrifices. The flashcards. The smell of cabbage. The empty bank account. The dusty art portfolio and the closetite all came crashing down on me in one unbearable wave. I wasn't his partner. I was his sponsor. I was a convenience. A 7-year-long stepping stone that he had now firmly stepped off of. Onto a brighter, more promising shore. And he hadn't even looked back. My grief turned molten, transforming into a white-hot rage. My eyes darted around the room. The balloons. The stupid, cheerful balloons. I walked over to the first one. Congratulations. And I didn't just pop it. I squeezed it between my hands until it exploded with a deafening bang. Then the next. And the next. Bang. 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 Each sound was a small, satisfying act of destruction. I tore the banner from the wall, ripping the smiling cartoon doctor in half. I marched into the kitchen, grabbed the pot of beef stew, his favorite, the expensive stew, and dumped the entire thing into the trash can. It landed with a sickening, wet slap. Finally, I was left with the cake. The candles had burned down, leaving little trails of colored wax on the white frosting. I stared at the words piped in blue icing. We're so proud of you. We. There was no we anymore. There was only me. I plunged my hands directly into the cake, smashing it, destroying the words, until my fingers were covered in sticky frosting and my rage dissolved back into heartbreaking sobs. I slid down the kitchen cabinets until I was sitting on the cold linoleum floor, a mess of cake and tears. This was my celebration. This was the finish line. My phone was on the counter. My hand, shaking and covered in frosting, managed to grab it. I scrolled through my contacts until I found her name. Maya. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Hey, you feeling better? She asked, her voice cheerful. Ready to come back to the land of the living and serve some coffee tomorrow? I tried to speak, but only a choked gasp came out. Clara. Her voice sharpened instantly with concern. Clara. What's wrong? What happened? He's gone. I managed to whisper, the words scraping my raw throat. Maya, he's gone. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, her voice came back, low and furious. That son of a bitch. I knew it. Another pause. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm home. I cried, looking around at the wreckage of my party. The wreckage of my life. I don't know what to do. Don't do anything, she said, her voice firm, commanding. Don't move. Don't clean anything up. Just stay on the floor if you have to. I'm coming over. I'll be there in 10 minutes. The line went dead. I dropped the phone on the floor beside me. I pulled my knees to my chest, wrapping my arms around them, and I sat there in the silence, surrounded by popped balloons and the sweet, cloying smell of destroyed cake. The shock was beginning to wear off, replaced by a cold, terrifying numbness. He was gone. And for the first time in 7 years, I was completely and utterly alone. Maya was true to her word. 9 minutes later, she was pounding on my door. For a moment, I didn't move from the floor. The thought of getting up, of facing her, felt like an impossible task. But the pounding was insistent, a frantic rhythm that cut through my stupor. Clara, open the door. I swear to God, if you don't open this door, I'm kicking it in. I dragged myself up, my limbs heavy and sticky with cake. When I pulled the door open, her face was a mixture of fury and deep, aching pity. Her eyes took in my statemy tear-streaked face, my frosting-covered hands, the destroyed apartment behind me, and her expression hardened. Oh, honey, she breathed. She didn't wait for an invitation. She pushed past me, her gaze sweeping over the dead balloons and the ripped banner. She kicked a piece of the ruined cake out of her path. He's not just a son of a bitch, she muttered, her voice shaking with rage. He's a monster. She turned back to me, and her anger softened into pure, unwavering support. She grabbed my arm and gently pulled me towards the bathroom. Come on. Let's get you cleaned up. She turned on the shower, not waiting for me to protest. She helped me peel off my ruined dress and guided me under the hot spray. The water washed away the frosting and the tears, but it couldn't touch the cold, hollow ache deep inside my chest. I just stood there, letting the water sluice over me, while Maya sat on the closed toilet lid, a silent, steady guard. That night, she didn't leave. She cleaned up the wreckage of my party, throwing the last of the balloons and the trashed food into garbage bags. She didn't say much, just worked with a grim, efficient determination. She found a clean t-shirt and shorts for me to wear, made me drink a glass of water, and then led me to my bed. She pulled the covers over me as if I were a child. "Get some sleep," she said, her voice soft. "I can't," I whispered into the darkness. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, her hand resting on my back. A small, warm weight in an ocean of cold. The days that followed were a gray, featureless blur. Grief was a thick fog that filled my lungs and clouded my vision. I moved through my life like a ghost, haunting the edges of my own existence. I went to work at the diner because I had to. Rent was due, and Leo's half wouldn't be coming anymore. But I was useless. I forgot orders. I dropped a tray of milkshakes, the glasses shattering on the floor in a spray of sticky sweetness. That felt like a mockery of my life. My boss, a kind, balding man named Sal, pulled me aside. "Clara, what's going on?" he asked gently. "You're not yourself." I just shook my head, unable to form the words. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired." He must have heard the rumors that were already starting to whisper through the small town. Everyone knew everyone's business in Maple Creek. He just patted my shoulder awkwardly. "Take a break in the back when you need to." The stockroom became my refuge. I would hide between shelves stacked high with giant cans of tomatoes and industrial-sized bags of flour, and I would cry. Silent, shuddering sobs that left me exhausted and empty. Maya tried to drag me out of my misery. She showed up at my door with movies and pizza. She tried to get me to go for a walk, to go to a bar, to do anything other than sit in my silent, half-empty apartment. I refused every time. The effort of pretending to be okay was too much to bear. "You have to eat, Clara," she'd plead, holding out a slice of pizza. "I'm not hungry." "You can't let him win. You can't let him destroy you." But I already felt destroyed. I felt like a building that had been gutted by fire. The foundation was still there, but everything inside was just ash and rubble. My nights were the worst. I couldn't sleep in the bed we had shared. His scent was gone, but his absence was a physical presence beside me. I would lie awake for hours, my mind a merciless tormentor, replaying every happy memory, every promise he had ever made, and twisting them into evidence of my own stupidity. And then I discovered a new, more refined form of torture: social media. I'd stay up until 3 in the morning, the blue light of my phone illuminating my tear-stained face, scrolling through his life, his new life. There he was at a black-tie hospital fundraiser, looking impossibly handsome in a tuxedo I'd never seen before. Annabeth was on his arm, draped in a glittering silver dress, laughing up at him. They looked like a power couple from a magazine. I found Annabeth's profile. It was public. It was a window into the world he had chosen over me. Pictures of her family's sprawling estate on the lake, photos from a ski trip to Aspen with other doctors, a picture of her and Leo, clinking champagne glasses on a balcony overlooking the city lights. The caption read, "Celebrating the end of one chapter and the beginning of a beautiful new one." It had been posted 3 days before he broke up with me. The pain was so sharp, so specific. It felt like I was swallowing glass. He hadn't just left me. He had been planning his new life while I was still planning our future. While I was making flashcards and cooking cabbage soup, he was falling in love with someone else. The lie of it all was what hurt the most. About a week after he left, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi Clara. This is Mark, Leo's friend. He asked me to come by and pick up his things. Would tomorrow afternoon be okay?" He didn't come himself. Of course. He didn't. That would have required courage, a confrontation with the mess he had made. It was easier to send an emissary, a stranger, to perform the final amputation. I texted back a single word, "Fine." Mark arrived the next day. He was a lanky, nervous resident I vaguely recognized from a hospital picnic years ago. He couldn't look me in the eye. "Hey," he mumbled, shifting his weight from foot to foot in the doorway. Leo made a list. He handed me a piece of paper. It was a neat, bulleted list of his possessions: anatomy textbooks, desk lamp, gray armchair, framed anatomy chart. It was cold, transactional, like a packing list for a trip. I stood aside and let him in. I watched, numb and detached, as this stranger dismantled my life. He packed Leo's books into a cardboard box. He unplugged the ugly desk lamp from the wall. He and a friend he brought with him struggled to maneuver the gray his armchair out the door. I sat on the couch, hugging a pillow to my chest, and just watched. Each item that left the apartment took a memory with it. The books he had spent hundreds of hours studying, the lamp that had illuminated his late nights, the chair where he used to sit and tell me about his day. The last item on the list was the anatomy chart on the wall. It was large and heavy. As Mark lifted it off the hook, it left a clean, faded rectangle on the pale yellow paint. A perfect outline of what used to be there. A ghost on the wall. When they were done, the apartment felt cavernously empty. The living room was missing its centerpiece. The bookshelf had huge gaps, like missing teeth. Mark stood in the doorway, the last box in his hands. "That's everything," he said, still avoiding my eyes. He told me to tell you he wishes you the best." I almost laughed. It was the most pathetic, cowardly, meaningless sentiment he could have possibly sent. I just nodded, unable to speak. Mark gave me a final, pitying look and then left. I was alone again. But this time it was different. It was final. His physical presence was completely erased. All that was left were the invisible things, the memories that clung to the air like dust motes. That night, I opened the closet and found a small box tucked away on the top shelf. It was my box, my Leo box. Inside was a collection of our 7 years. Ticket stubs from our first movie, a terrible horror film that made me laugh instead of scream. A dried, crumbling rose from our first anniversary. A postcard he'd sent me from a medical conference in Chicago. A handful of silly photo booth strips where we were making goofy faces. I sat on the floor, surrounded by these paper ghosts, and I cried until I had no tears left. I cried for the 19-year-old girl who fell in love with a brilliant, ambitious boy. I cried for the woman who gave up her own dreams to support his. And I cried for the fool who believed that love and sacrifice would be enough. Because in the end, they weren't. They weren't even close. The weeks bled into a month, and the fog of grief, while still present, began to thin in places. I could see the edges of my life again, but I didn't recognize the landscape. My world had been so small, so completely centered around Leo, that without him, I was lost. My entire routine, my purpose, had vanished. I no longer stayed up late, waiting for him to come home. I no longer spent my days off doing his laundry or grocery shopping for his favorite foods. My time was suddenly my own, and the vast, empty expanse of it was terrifying. I continued my work at the diner, a robot programmed for a single task: take order, deliver food, refill coffee, repeat. The regulars, who had known me for years as Leo's girl, now treated me with a gentle, cautious pity. They'd ask me how I was doing, their eyes full of a kindness that felt like sandpaper on my raw nerves. I would just smile a tight, brittle smile and say, "I'm fine, thanks," before rushing away. One afternoon, a torrential downpour started, the kind of sudden, violent Michigan storm that turns the sky a bruised purple-gray. The diner was slow. I was staring out the window, watching the rain sheet down, feeling a bleakness that matched the weather. Sal saw the look on my face. "Go on. Get out of here, Clara," he said, untying his own apron. "I can handle it. Go home and get some rest." I didn't want to go home. Home was the epicenter of my loneliness. But I didn't want to stay, either. So I mumbled my thanks, grabbed my thin jacket, and stepped out into the storm. I didn't have an umbrella. The rain plastered my hair to my head and soaked through my clothes in seconds. I started walking, with no destination in mind. I just needed to move, to feel something other than the hollow ache in my chest. The cold rain on my skin was a welcome shock, a distraction from the storm inside me. My wandering took me down a side street I rarely visited, a quieter part of town lined with old brick buildings and small, independent shops. I was shivering, my teeth chattering, when I saw it. A warm, yellow light spilled out from a storefront window. The sign above, painted in elegant, curling script, read The Page and Bean. Below it, in smaller letters, used books and fresh coffee. I had never been inside. It always seemed too quiet, too intellectual for me. It was a place for students and professors, not diner waitresses. But the promise of warmth and shelter was too strong to resist. I pushed open the heavy wooden door, a small bell chimming my arrival, and stepped inside. The air was warm and smelled wonderful. A rich, earthy mix of old paper, brewing coffee, and something sweet, like cinnamon. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, crammed with books of every size and color. It was a labyrinth of stories, a quiet haven from the raging storm outside. A few patrons were scattered among the cozy armchairs, reading, their faces illuminated by small, shaded lamps. It was peaceful. A man was standing behind a worn wooden counter, polishing a pair of glasses with a soft cloth. He looked up when I entered. He had kind eyes, the color of warm honey, and a quiet, thoughtful face. His dark hair had a few threads of gray at the temples, and a faded flannel shirt was rolled up to his elbows. "Rough day to be without an umbrella," he said, his voice as calm and quiet as the shop itself. He gestured to the coat rack by the door. "You can hang your jacket there. You look like you could use a hot drink." "On the house." I was too cold and miserable to argue. "Thank you," I mumbled, hanging my dripping jacket. "Tea? Coffee? Hot chocolate?" he asked, already turning to the espresso machine behind him. "Tea would be nice," I said. As he worked, his movements were efficient and graceful. I found myself studying him. I realized I had seen him before. He sometimes came into the diner for breakfast, always sitting alone in a booth by the window, a book open beside his plate. He was always polite, always left a good tip, but he never made small talk. He was just a quiet, solitary fixture. He placed a steaming mug on the counter in front of me. "Earl Grey. Hope that's okay." "It's perfect. Thank you." I wrapped my cold hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. "I'm Clara," I said, not sure why. I hadn't offered my name to a stranger in years. He smiled. A small, genuine smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "I know. I'm Ethan. You know who I am? It's a small town," he said with a slight shrug. "And you're a fixture at the corner booth. I'm usually the guy with the book and booth for." I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Oh, right. I'm sorry." Don't be," he interrupted gently. "It's your job to bring me coffee, not to memorize my life story." He leaned against the counter, his demeanor relaxed and unthreatening. "So, Clara from the corner booth, what brings you to my humble establishment in the middle of a deluge?" I wasn't sure how to answer. The truth felt too heavy, too messy to dump on a near stranger. But his calm presence was disarming. He wasn't looking at me with pity, just simple, open curiosity. "I was just walking," I said, looking down into my tea. "Trying to, I don't know, think." "This is a good place for thinking," he said. "Sometimes the stories on the shelves are so loud, they drown out the ones in your own head." I looked up at him, surprised by his perception. That was exactly how I felt. My own story was a broken record, playing the same painful song over and over. We stood in a comfortable silence for a moment. He didn't press me for more information. He just let me be. "I heard about you and Leo," he said finally, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "I'm sorry. That's a tough thing to go through." I braced myself for the usual platitudes. "You're better off without him. There were other fish in the sea." But he didn't say any of that. He just acknowledged my pain, simply and directly. "Yeah," I said, my throat tight. "It is." "So," he said, changing the subject with a subtle skill. "What do you like to do, Clara, when you're not working or going through tough things?" The question caught me off guard. It was the same question Maya had asked me, but coming from him, it felt different. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a question. "What do you like?" "I don't know anymore," I confessed, the admission feeling shameful. I used to like to draw, to paint. A long time ago. A light sparked in his eyes. "Really? What kind of things?" "Anything. People. Mostly. Landscapes. Whatever I saw." "What happened?" he asked. I shrugged. The old, familiar excuse ready on my tongue. "Life. My boyfriend was in medical school. It was expensive. I had to work. There wasn't time for hobbies." He nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. He didn't say, "You should have made time." He didn't judge me. He just listened. "Well," he said after a moment, "time is something you seem to have now." It was true. I had endless, empty oceans of it. He walked out from behind the counter and gestured towards a small, quiet corner of the shop. There, on an easel, sat a half-finished canvas. It was a painting of the very street we were on, rendered in soft, Moody oils that perfectly captured the feeling of a rainy afternoon. Next to it, on the wall, were several other small paintings for Celia: a portrait of an old man, a study of a vase of sunflowers. A local artist brings these in, he explained. She says painting is the only thing that keeps her sane. He looked from the paintings to me. A talent like that shouldn't be forgotten, Clara. It shouldn't be packed away in a box. My breath hitched. How could he know? How could he know about the dusty portfolio I kept hidden in my closet? A secret shrine to a person I used to be? It was just a phrase. A lucky guess. But it hit me with the force of a prophecy. The rain had started to let up outside. The damp were softening to a steady drizzle. My tea was gone. I knew I should leave. Thank you for the tea, I said, placing the empty mug on the counter. And for the conversation. Any time, he said. The storm will pass. They always do. He was talking about the weather. But we both knew he wasn't. I walked home in the gray twilight, the air washed clean by the rain. Ethan's words echoed in my mind. A talent like that shouldn't be forgotten. It shouldn't be packed away in a box. When I got back to my apartment, it felt different. Less empty. Less like a tomb. It felt like a space. A blank canvas. For the first time in over a month, I didn't turn on the TV for noise. I didn't scroll through my phone, looking for pain. Instead, I walked to the hall closet. I pulled out the old coats, the broken vacuum, and from the very back, I retrieved the dusty black portfolio. I carried it into the living room and laid it on the floor, right in the spot where Leo's armchair used to be. I unzipped it. I took out the drawings one by one, spreading them out on the rug. The charcoal faces, the watercolor sunsets, the girl with the hopeful eyes. I stayed there for hours, just looking at them. It wasn't sad anymore. It felt like finding a box of old photographs of a dear friend I had lost touch with. A friend I desperately wanted to know again. That night, for the first time since Leo left, I slept through the entire night, and I didn't dream of him. I dreamed of colors. The next morning, I woke up with a feeling I hadn't experienced in a very long time, a flicker of purpose. It wasn't a roaring fire, just a tiny, fragile spark, but it was enough. After my shift at the diner, I didn't go straight home. I walked to the town's only art supply store. It was a small, dusty shop I hadn't set foot in since I was a teenager. The smell of oil paints and turpentine hit me the moment I opened the door. A scent so familiar and so deeply missed that it made my chest ache with a strange mix of nostalgia and regret. I bought a small set of watercolor paints, a pad of thick, textured paper, and a few brushes. The purchase felt both reckless and essential. It was the first money I had spent on myself in something that wasn't a necessity like rent or groceries in 7 years. Back in my apartment, I cleared the small kitchen table, my hands trembling slightly. I set out the paper, the paints, the little plastic palette. I filled a glass with water. For a long time, I just stared at the blank white page. It was intimidating. What if I had forgotten how? What if the girl with the hopeful eyes was gone for good? I thought of Ethan's words, just start. So I did. I dipped the brush in the water, then into a deep blue paint. I touched the brush to the paper. The color bloomed, spreading across the textured surface. And just like that, something inside me unlocked. I painted for hours. I didn't try to create a masterpiece. I just let the colors flow. I painted the view from my kitchen window, the gnarled branches of the old oak tree, the gray sky. I painted a cup of coffee, the steam rising in wisps. The movements felt rusty at first, my hand unsure. But slowly, the muscle memory returned. The familiar dance of brush on paper, of water and pigment, began to feel like coming home. When I finally stopped, my back was stiff and my fingers were stained with paint. 3 finished paintings lay on the table. They weren't perfect. They were simple, a little clumsy, but they were mine. I had created something from nothing, in a life that felt defined by loss and destruction. It was a profound and powerful feeling. Painting became my ritual. It was my anchor in the long, empty evenings. It was my therapy. When I felt a wave of grief for Leo, I painted with dark, stormy blues and angry reds. When I felt a flicker of hope, I used bright yellows and soft greens. I was pouring all the emotions I couldn't speak onto the paper. My art became the diary of my healing. I also started visiting the page and being regularly. It became my sanctuary. I'd buy a coffee and sit in one of the comfortable armchairs, sometimes reading, sometimes just sketching the other customers in a small notebook I carried with me now. Ethan was always there. A quiet, steady presence behind the counter. We fell into an easy rhythm of conversation. He never pried. Never asked about Leo. Instead, he asked about my day. He asked what book I was reading. He asked me about my art. One afternoon, I brought one of my small watercolor paintings with me. A landscape of the park by the river. My hands were sweating as I approached the counter. I said, my voice barely a whisper. Clara. He greeted me with his usual warm smile. The usual. Actually, I said, taking a deep breath. I wanted to show you something. I pulled the painting from my bag and slid it onto the counter. It felt like I was showing him a piece of my soul. He picked it up carefully. His expression serious. He studied it for a long time. His eyes tracing the lines of the trees. The reflection in the water. It's beautiful, he said finally. His voice soft with sincerity. You have a real gift, Clara. The way you capture the light, it's really special. Praise from Leo had always been tied to my utility. You make the best stew. You're so good at organizing my notes. It was always about what I could do for him. But Ethan's praise was different. He was seeing me. He was seeing my talent. The part of me I had kept hidden for so long. A warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with coffee. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Have you thought about showing your work? He asked casually, as if it were the most natural question in the world. I laughed. A short, nervous sound. Showing it where? I'm a waitress who doodles. I'm not a real artist. He looked at me. His gaze direct. Says who? The person who determines if you're a real artist is you. And for what it's worth. He added, tapping the painting gently. This is real. His belief in me was a foreign and intoxicating thing. It was a seed of confidence that, in the fertile ground of my newfound freedom, began to sprout. My life started to take on a new shape, a new rhythm. I still worked at the diner, but it no longer defined me. It was just a job, a way to pay the bills while I pursued my passion. My evenings were for painting. My days off were for walking through the town, sketchbook in hand, seeing the world with an artist's eyes for the first time in years. Maple Creek, the town I had once seen as a cage, started to reveal its hidden beauty. Maya noticed the change in me. You're smiling again, she said one day during a lull at the diner. A real smile. Not that creepy one you were doing for a while. I laughed. I feel lighter. It's the art, isn't it? She said, her eyes knowing. And maybe that cute, quiet bookshop owner you keep talking about? I felt my cheeks flush. Ethan is just a friend. How? She said, not looking convinced. Well, whatever it is, it looks good on you. It's about time you had a life that was actually yours. She was right. I was building a life from the ground up. A life based on my own interests. My own passions. It was quiet. It was small. It wasn't the glamorous, high-powered world Leo inhabited. But it was authentic. It was mine. One crisp autumn evening, Ethan was hosting a small poetry reading at the shop. He had invited me to come. I felt nervous. Out of place. But I went anyway. The shop was filled with a gentle, appreciative crowd. I found a seat in the back, content to just listen and observe. As the last poet finished, Ethan stepped up to the small microphone to thank everyone for coming. His eyes scanned the crowd, and for a moment, they met mine. He gave me that same small, genuine smile. In that moment, surrounded by books and art and quiet, thoughtful people, I felt a sense of belonging I had never felt in Leo's world of competitive residence and sterile hospital corridors. After the crowd had thinned, I was helping him stack a few chairs when he turned to me. I have an idea, he said, his expression thoughtful. That wall, by the coffee bar, it's looking a little bare. I looked over at the large, empty brick wall. I was thinking, he continued, that it would be a perfect place to hang some local art. A few paintings, maybe. Change them out every month or so. He paused, his gaze meeting mine again. I was thinking you could be the first artist I feature. I stared at him, my heart starting to pound. Me? Ethan? I can't. My paintings aren't good enough. Let me be the judge of that, he said gently. Just think about it. No pressure. But I think people should see your work. I walked home that night in a daze. My own exhibition. It was a terrifying, exhilarating thought. It was the kind of dream the 19-year-old girl in my self-portrait would have had. For 7 years, I had put all my energy into making Leo's dream come true. The idea that my own dream might actually be within reach was almost too much to comprehend. I stayed up late that night, not with grief, but with excitement. I looked through all the paintings I had done over the past few months. There were dozens of them, a visual chronicle of my journey from heartbreak to healing. They were good. I could see it now. They were really, truly good. I could do this. I wanted to do this. The next day, I walked into the page and beamed with a new confidence in my step. Ethan was behind the counter, a book open in front of him. He looked up as I approached. "Clara, you've been thinking." I smiled. A real, full, genuine smile. "I have," I said. "And my answer is yes." His answering smile was brighter than any light in the shop. "I was hoping you'd say that." We spent the next hour planning it out, deciding which paintings to hang, where to place them. The excitement was a current of electricity between us. It felt like a true partnership, a collaboration. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like an equal. I left the shop that afternoon feeling like I was floating on air. The future, which had once been a terrifying black hole, now seemed bright with possibility. I was finally standing on my own 2 feet, building a life I could be proud of. I was no longer just Leo's girl. I was Clara Brooks. I was an artist. And I was happy. It was a fragile happiness, I knew, but it was real. And as I walked home, the setting sun painting the autumn leaves in brilliant shades of gold and red, I felt a deep, profound sense of peace. I had survived the storm. The worst was over. Or so I thought. The next 2 weeks were some of the happiest I could remember. My life had a new center of gravity. Instead of revolving around Leo's needs, my days were now structured around my art. I spent every spare moment painting, preparing for my small exhibition at the Page and Bean. The impending deadline gave me a focus I hadn't had in years. I wasn't just painting away my sadness anymore. I was painting towards a future. Ethan was my silent partner in this venture. He installed professional gallery lighting along the brick wall, consulted with me on which frames would look best, and treated my watercolors with the reverence of a museum curator. His quiet, unwavering belief in me was a scaffolding that held up my fragile new confidence. There was an unspoken connection growing between us, a gentle current of mutual respect and affection that was as comforting as a warm, book-scented air of his shop. I was finally starting to feel whole again. The gaping wound left by Leo was beginning to scar over. It was still there, a tender spot in my memory, but it no longer ached with every breath. I could go a whole day without thinking of him. Sometimes, I even went to. Then, one Thursday afternoon, Maya shattered my peaceful new world. I was behind the counter at the diner, wiping down the stainless steel surface, humming to myself. The lunch rush was over. Maya walked over from the break room, her face unusually grim. She was holding a copy of the Maple Creek Chronicle, the local weekly paper that was usually filled with news about high school football games and bake sales. She folded it open on the counter in front of me, her finger pointing to a picture. "I'm so sorry, Clara," she said, her voice low. "I thought you should see this before someone else showed you." My humming stopped. I looked down, and the floor fell away from beneath my feet. It was a large, glossy photograph on the society page. Leo and Annabeth. They were standing close together, beaming, her hand resting on his chest, a massive diamond ring flashing on her finger. They looked radiant, triumphant, and impossibly perfect. He was wearing the same tuxedo I'd seen in his social media pictures. She was in a stunning white dress. They looked like they belonged on top of a wedding cake. But it was the headline above the photo that sucked the air from my lungs. Hospital power couple announces engagement. Dr. Leo Vance to wed Dr. Annabeth Sterling. Engaged. The word echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of my mind. Engaged. My blood ran cold. I read the accompanying article, my eyes scanning the lines of cheerful, laudatory prose in a blur of disbelief. It talked about their shared passion for medicine, their brilliant careers. It mentioned her father, the esteemed Dr. Harrison Sterling, and how delighted he was to welcome Leo into their prominent local family. It detailed their plans for a lavish wedding next summer at the Sterling family's lakeside estate. It was a fairy tale. A perfect, beautiful fairy tale built directly on the ruins of my life. "Clara." Maya's voice was a distant sound, coming from very far away. "Are you okay?" I couldn't answer. I felt a strange, detached calm settle over me, the kind of eerie stillness that comes in the eye of a hurricane. The pain was so immense, so overwhelming, that my body simply shut down. It was beyond tears. It was a deep, internal implosion. I had foolishly believed that the worst was over. I had thought the initial betrayal was the deepest cut. I was wrong. This was worse. This was confirmation. This was the irrefutable, public record proof that my 7 years were not just a failed relationship, but a lie, a calculated deception. Their relationship wasn't new. The timeline in the article made it clear. They had been a beloved couple within the hospital community for the better part of a year, which meant for the last year of our relationship, while I was working double shifts to pay for his board exams, while I was lovingly packing his lunches and telling myself his distance was just stress, he was with her. He was building this other life, this real life, while keeping me on the side as his convenient, low-cost support system. I wasn't just replaced. I was used. I was a tool that had served its purpose and was now discarded. The last 7 years of my life weren't a partnership. They were a transaction. I had paid, in every conceivable way, for his ticket into this new world, and the moment he arrived, he slammed the door in my face. "I have to go," I said, my voice flat and robotic. I untied my apron and dropped it on the counter. "Clara, wait." Maya called after me, her voice laced with panic. "Don't go be alone right now." But I couldn't stay there. I couldn't be anywhere. I walked out of the diner, leaving the newspaper and my friend behind, and just started walking. The crisp autumn air felt like ice against my skin. The cheerful colors of the fall leaves seemed garish and offensive. I found myself, predictably, outside the Page and Bean. I could see Ethan through the window, talking to a customer. He looked up and saw me, and his smile of greeting quickly faded when he saw my face. He said something to the customer and immediately came to the door. "Clara, what's wrong?" he asked, his kind eyes filled with alarm. I opened my mouth to tell him, but the words wouldn't come out. A terrible, choking sob finally broke through my dam of numbness. The sound was ragged and ugly. I couldn't breathe. The world was tilting. The edges of my vision going dark. Ethan's hands were on my arms, steadying me. "Okay. Come on. Inside." He guided me through the shop, past the concerned glances of the few customers, and into the small office behind the counter. He sat me down in his worn office chair and knelt in front of me. "Breathe," he said, his voice a calm, reassuring anchor in my spiraling panic. "Just breathe with me. In and out." I tried to follow his instructions, my chest heaving with convulsive sobs. He waited patiently, not rushing me, not crowding me, just staying there, a solid presence in my chaos. When my crying finally subsided into exhausted, hiccuping gasps, I managed to push the words out. "He's engaged." Ethan didn't need to ask who. His face tightened, a flicker of anger in his gentle eyes. "I see," he said, his voice quiet but laced with steel. "It was all a lie," I whispered, the shame and humiliation washing over me in a fresh, sickening wave. The whole time, he was with her, and I was just the fool who paid his bills. "No," Ethan said firmly, his gaze unwavering. "You weren't a fool, Clara. You were trusting. You were loyal. You loved someone. There was no shame in that. The shame belongs entirely to him." His words were a balm on my wounded pride. But the pain was still a physical thing, a shard of ice in my heart. All the progress I had made, all the healing, all the fragile confidence I had built, it all felt like a joke. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let myself be so thoroughly devalued? "The exhibition," I said, my voice hollow. "I can't do it." "What? Why not?" "Because it's a fraud," I cried, gesturing wildly. "All those paintings about healing and finding myself, it's a lie. I'm not healed. I'm right back where I started. I'm a pathetic cliché, the dumped girl who took up a hobby. No one wants to see that. I want to see it," he said, his voice unwavering. "Maya wants to see it. Sal from the diner wants to see it. That nice old lady who buys the mystery novels wants to see it. You know why? Because what you've done is not a lie, Clara. It's the truest thing in the world. You took the worst pain of your life and you made it into something beautiful. That's not pathetic. That's the definition of strength." I stared at him, tears blurring my vision again. He saw strength where I saw only weakness. He saw beauty where I saw only wreckage. "I don't feel strong," I whispered. "You don't have to," he said. "You just have to keep going." Don't let him take this from you. 2. He's taken enough. This art, this show, this is yours. Don't let his shadow fall on it. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be the strong person he saw. But the public announcement of the engagement felt like a final, crushing verdict on my life. He had won. He had gotten everything he ever wanted career. The money. The perfect, society-approved fiancé. And what did I have? A part-time job at a diner and a few dozen watercolors. It felt like an unbearably unfair cosmic joke. I left the bookshop that day feeling more lost and broken than I had on the night he left. The small flicker of purpose I had found was extinguished, drowned by a tidal wave of inadequacy and shame. I went home to my empty apartment and I didn't paint. I packed my art supplies away, putting them in the back of the same closet where they had languished for 7 years. Ethan was wrong. The storm hadn't passed. It had just been regrouping, waiting to hit me with its full, devastating force. And this time, I was afraid I wouldn't survive it. The days following the engagement announcement were a retreat into darkness. I called Sal and told him I had the flu, that I couldn't come into work. It was a lie, but the truth felt far too complex and pathetic to explain. The thought of facing the pitying glances of the regulars, of having to make small talk over coffee and pancakes, was unbearable. I needed to be invisible. My apartment, which had started to feel like a sanctuary, once again became my prison. I drew the blinds, shutting out the autumn sunlight, and lived in a perpetual twilight. I didn't paint. The easel in the corner seemed to mock me, a monument to a foolish, fleeting hope. My art supplies were back in the closet, buried under the weight of my failure. Ethan's words about strength echoed in my mind, but they felt like a foreign language I couldn't understand. Strength was for other people. I was just broken. Maya came by every day. She'd bring groceries I didn't eat and movies I didn't watch. She'd sit with me in the gloom, sometimes talking, sometimes just being a silent, comforting presence. You can't stay in here forever, she said gently on the third day, trying to coax a spoonful of soup into my mouth. Why not? I mumbled, turning my face away. There's nothing for me out there. There is, she insisted. There's a whole life out there that has nothing to do with him. You are starting to build it. Clara, don't stop now. It was a fantasy. Maya, I was playing dress up as an artist. But I'm not. I'm just the ex-girlfriend. That's my entire identity in this town. Even Ethan's calls went to voicemail. He left quiet, encouraging messages, just checking in. Clara, the wall is still here, waiting for you. Call me if you need anything at all. Each message was a small, painful reminder of the hope I had lost. I couldn't face his kindness. I was too ashamed of my own weakness. The day of the scheduled exhibition opening came and went. I spent it in bed, the covers pulled over my head, trying to sleep away the hours. The silence from the outside world was deafening. I had failed. I had let everyone down. Most of all, I had let myself down. A week passed. Then another. I was running out of money. I knew I couldn't hide forever. With a sense of dread, I finally dragged myself out of my apartment and back to the diner. The bell above the door chimed as I entered, announcing my return to the world. A few of the regulars looked up. They didn't stare. They just gave me small, sad smiles and went back to their newspapers. Sal met me at the counter. Good to see you, kid, he said, his voice gruff but kind. We missed you. He didn't ask if I was better. He knew. The familiar routine of work was both a comfort and a torment. It kept my hands busy, but it left my mind free to churn and obsess. I moved through my shift in a daze, my smile plastered on, my real self hidden away somewhere deep inside. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. When he walked in, the bell chimed, and I looked up from the coffee pot I was refilling, my standard dishy waitress greeting ready on my lips. Welcome to the corner booth. How can I? The words died in my throat. It was Leo. He stood just inside the door, looking completely out of place in his expensive charcoal suit and polished leather shoes. He looked thinner than I remembered, and there were new lines of stress around his eyes, but he was still devastatingly handsome. My heart gave a painful, violent lurch, a traitorous leap of recognition. For a terrifying second, my only impulse was to run to him. Then I saw the look on his face. He wasn't here to see me. He was here on a mission. His eyes darted around the diner, a flicker of distaste crossing his features as he took in the cracked vinyl and the worn linoleum. He looked like a king visiting the slums. He saw me, and his expression shifted to one of strained politeness. He walked towards the counter, his steps measured and confident. He was no longer the broke, exhausted student I had known. He was Dr. Vance, a man of importance. Clara, he said, his voice low and smooth. Can we talk? Somewhere private. My feet were rooted to the floor. My voice, when I finally found it, was a reedy whisper. What are you doing here? Leo, I just need 5 minutes of your time, he said, his eyes avoiding mine, instead focusing on a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. It's important. Maya emerged from the kitchen, a tray of dishes in her hands. She saw Leo and froze, her eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. She set the tray down with a loud clatter. You've got a lot of nerve showing your face in here, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. Maya, please, I said, putting a hand on her arm. This was my fight. I led Leo to the back stockroom, the place where I had cried so many tears over him. The irony was not lost on me. The small, windowless room was filled with the familiar smell of bleach and bulk spices. I leaned against a stack of canned peaches, crossing my arms over my chest, creating a physical barrier between us. What do you want? He looked uncomfortable, out of his element. Look, I know this is awkward, he began. Awkward? I cut him off, a bubble of hysterical laughter rising in my throat. Awkward is bumping into an old teacher at the grocery store. This is something else entirely. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Okay, you're right. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. I'm not angry, Leo, I said. And the terrifying thing was, it was true. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard emptiness. I'm just tired. So, please, just say what you came to say and go. He took a deep breath, like a man about to dive into icy water. It's about the engagement. About Annabeth. Her family is very traditional. They value privacy. Reputation is everything to them. I stared at him, uncomprehending. What does that have to do with me? He finally looked at me, and his eyes were pleading. But it wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was a plea for a favor. They know we were together for a long time. Annabeth had to tell them. And they're concerned that our past might become a source of gossip. That you might say things. The blood drained from my face. I felt dizzy. He wasn't here to apologize. He wasn't here to explain. He was here to buy my silence. He was here to manage his public relations. Say things, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. What kind of things? Leo, the truth. You mean the truth? That I supported you for 7 years? That you were seeing her while you were still living with me? That you dumped me 2 weeks after I paid for your medical board exams? That truth. He flinched at every word, as if I were physically striking him. It's not that simple, Clara. Things got complicated. No, it is that simple, I countered, my voice gaining strength, fueled by a sudden, glacial fury. You used me, and now you're worried that your new, rich, important family will find out that their prize-winning son-in-law has a dirty little secret. In his past, a waitress from a greasy spoon who knows exactly what kind of man he really is. That's not fair, he protested, his voice rising in frustration. I cared about you. Did you? I shot back. When? In between lying to me? In between dates with your future fiancé? When exactly did the caring happen? Leo, I seemed to have missed it. He had no answer. He just stood there, looking trapped. And in that moment, I saw him for the first time with perfect, devastating clarity. The love I had felt for him, the grief, the heartbreak, it all evaporated. All I saw was a weak, selfish, and profoundly pathetic man. A coward. I came here to ask you, as a courtesy, to be discreet, he said, his voice stiff now, his charm replaced by a cold entitlement. For everyone's sake, there's no need to drag all of this up again. It's in the past. Let's just let it be. This was it. My moment of choice. I could be the quiet, agreeable girl he expected me to be. The girl who would nod and accept her fate. Who would swallow her pain to protect his reputation. The girl I had been for 7 years. Or I could be someone else. I thought of Ethan, telling me I was strong. I thought of my paintings, hidden in the closet. I thought of the 7 years I had given away. I stood up straight, uncrossing my arms. I looked him directly in the eye. And for the first time, I didn't feel smaller than him. I felt taller. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it filled the small room with an unshakable power. He blinked, confused. No. What do you mean? No. I mean, no. I repeated, my voice clear and steady. My 7 years are not your dirty secret to be swept under the rug. My story is not an inconvenience to your perfect new life. It's my life. It happened. And I will not be silenced by you or your fiancé's powerful family. I will not make myself small anymore just to make you comfortable. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. He was seeing a woman he didn't recognize. A woman I was only just beginning to meet myself. You have your life, Leo. I continued, my voice calm, devoid of the emotion that had plagued me for months. Go live it. But don't you ever come back here and ask me to hide my past to protect your future. Now, I have customers to wait on. So I need you to leave. I turned and walked to the door, my hand on the knob. I didn't wait for his reply. I didn't care what it was. I opened the door and walked back out into the diner, leaving him standing alone amongst the giant cans of peaches. I didn't look back. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I would never have to look back again. He was in my past, and for the first time, I was ready to walk into my future. Walking out of that stockroom was like walking out of a tomb. I left the ghost of my old self in there with him. As I stepped back into the familiar, brightly lit space of the diner, the world looked different, sharper, clearer. Maya was waiting anxiously by the coffee machine, her eyes wide with questions. I gave her a small, firm nod. A wave of relief washed over her face. She knew, without me saying a word, that a battle had been won. I picked up a coffee pot and walked towards a table of regulars, my movements steady and sure. I could feel Leo's presence behind me as he walked through the diner and out the door. The little bell chimed his exit, a sound of finality, of liberation. I didn't turn to watch him go. He was no longer a character in my story. He was just a footnote. That evening, after my shift, I didn't go home. I walked directly to the Page and Bean. The lights were on, casting a warm, inviting glow onto the darkening street. I pushed the door open. Ethan was behind the counter, shelving a stack of books. He looked up, and a slow smile spread across his face when he saw me. It wasn't a smile of pity or concern. It was just a smile, a welcome. Clara, he said, his voice holding a note of gentle surprise. Hi, I said, feeling a strange, wonderful nervousness. Is the offer still open? For the wall? His smile widened. He set the books down and leaned against the counter. The wall has been very patient, he said. It was beginning to think you'd forgotten about it. I'm sorry, I said, the apology genuine. I got lost for a while. We all get lost sometimes, he replied, his gaze kind and understanding. The important thing is finding your way back. Are you back, Clara? I took a deep breath, the air smelling of coffee and old paper and possibility. Yes, I said, and the word felt like the truest thing I had ever said. I'm back. The next few days were a whirlwind of renewed purpose. I retrieved my art supplies from the closet. But this time, I didn't just take them out. I organized them. I bought a proper artist tabouret to hold my paints and brushes. I set up my easel permanently by the window with the best light. My art was no longer a temporary hobby, a reaction to my grief. It was a permanent part of my home. It was a permanent part of me. My confrontation with Leo had unlocked something inside me. The last dregs of pain and humiliation had been replaced by a clean, invigorating sense of self-worth. It poured out of me and onto the canvas. I painted with a boldness I hadn't possessed before. My colors were brighter, my strokes more confident. I wasn't just painting my healing anymore. I was painting my strength. A week later, we hung the show. Ethan and I worked late into the night, carefully placing each painting on the large brick wall. When we were done, we stood back and looked at our work. The wall was transformed. It was alive with color and emotion. My journey of the past few months was laid bare for all to see, the dark, chaotic abstracts of my initial heartbreak, the tentative, hopeful landscapes of my first steps toward recovery, and the new, vibrant portraits I had painted in the last week. Full of light and life, Ethan had printed a small, elegant sign to hang beside the collection. It read, "The 7th year, watercolors by Clara Brooks." Seeing my name in print, formally connected to my art, made my breath catch in my throat. I was Clara Brooks. I was an artist. We decided to have a small, Informal opening reception the following Saturday. I was terrified no one would come. But Ethan put a sign in the window. Maya told everyone at the diner. And Sal even posted about it on the diner's social media page. Saturday night arrived. The bookshop was filled with the low hum of conversation and the soft clinking of glasses. And it was full of people. Maya was there, beaming with a pride so fierce it looked like it might burst out of her. Sal was there, looking awkward but impressed in a shirt and tie. My regulars from the diner were there, wandering from painting to painting, their faces full of surprise and admiration. The quiet, bookish patrons of Ethan's shop were there. They were all there for me. I stood in a corner, overwhelmed and deeply moved. People came up to me, strangers, to tell me how much they loved my work. An older woman with kind eyes told me one of my stormy landscapes perfectly captured how she felt after her husband passed away. A young college student told me my use of color was inspiring. They weren't just seeing paintings. They were seeing the feelings behind them. They were connecting with my story. From across the room, I saw Ethan watching me. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just watching me. A look of profound, quiet pride on his face. He raised his glass to me in a silent toast. I smiled back. A real, radiant smile that reached all the way to my eyes. In that moment, I felt seen. I felt valued. I felt whole. Later in the evening, after the crowd had started to thin, I found myself standing next to him, looking at the wall. "You did this, Clara," he said softly. "It's incredible. We did this." I corrected him. "I couldn't have done it without you. I just held the ladder," he said with a self-deprecating shrug. "You did all the climbing." We stood in a comfortable silence, shoulder to shoulder, looking at the paintings. A small red dot was stuck to the frame of one of my newer Picasso vibrant, sun-drenched portrait of Maya laughing. "You sold one," I whispered, my voice filled with awe. "3. Actually," he said, pointing out to other red dots I had missed. "That nice old lady who loves mysteries bought the stormy one." Tears pricked my eyes, but for the first time in a long time, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. As the last of the guests departed, leaving just the two of us in the quiet, peaceful shop, Ethan turned to me. "What's next, Clara Brooks?" he asked. I looked at the paintings on the wall, the chronicle of my broken heart and my slow, painstaking reconstruction. I thought of the 7 years I had spent in the shadows, believing my worth was tied to someone else's dream. And I thought of the future, a blank canvas, waiting for me. "I don't know," I said honestly. "And for the first time in my life, that feels exciting." He smiled. "I have a feeling it's going to be beautiful." He took a step closer, and his hand found mine. His fingers laced through mine. A simple, warm, and wonderfully solid connection. It wasn't a gesture of ownership or need. It was a gesture of partnership, of equality. We walked to the large front window of the shop and looked out at the quiet street of our small town. The lights of Maple Creek twinkled under a clear, starry sky. It was no longer a cage or a place of painful memories. It was just home. My home. I thought, briefly, of Leo. I pictured him in his big, fancy life with his beautiful, wealthy fiancée. I felt no anger, no bitterness. I felt nothing at all, except a distant, quiet sense of gratitude. His betrayal, as cruel and devastating as it was, had been a gift. It had shattered my life so completely that it forced me to build a new one, a better one. From the rubble, he had inadvertently set me free. I leaned my head against Ethan's shoulder, looking at my reflection in the dark glass. The woman looking back at me was not the same girl who had cried over a broken cake on the kitchen floor. Her eyes weren't filled with heartbreak. They were filled with pain, and light, and the quiet, unshakable strength of a woman who had finally, truly, found herself. The 7th year hadn't been the end. It had been the beginning.